I have been a trucker my whole life. I started at the age of 18. I was the only one responsible to earn for the family, and my uncle had introduced me to the truck and the truck life, and it was something that fascinated me. And I decided to drive into it and become officially working as a trucker at the age of 18. My first few months as a trucker, I was really doing the long trips. I loved the long journeys. When I was young, it was better. I could do the long trips. Interesting stories were made in that period. I met people. A lot of people were inclined to get a hitchhike in a truck. Makes one heck of a story to tell. And I was always excited about the people that I would meet on the journey. I was more cautioned about it. I was young and naive, and I thought maybe I control everything in the truck and I would think that there is no way creeps are going to cross paths with me. But one fine day, or would say night, that was not the case. It was December 25th, the holy night of Christmas, and I was out on the tour, and it was just something that had to be done. It was a medical supply shipment, and I just could not say no to that. That's the work of God, and I could possibly not refuse to that. So I was working the Christmas shift. I was working on the shift and trying to get it all delivered in time. The shipment was an emergency shipment, and they needed it in around 12 hours, and I decided to do just one stop after taking the shipment, and it was Lover's Stop. And I took all the resources and snacks and started my journey, and I just put my foot on the accelerator and just kept driving. And about at 4-hour mark, I saw 2 cars tailing my truck. I knew what was about to happen, so I made sure that my foot never gets away. And then I saw one of the cars come at the side, and he shot at the truck. And I just kept driving, and I knew I couldn't stop, and so I kept going. And around in 6 hours, they managed to get me to stop the truck. I wasn't going to let them stop me, so I said openly, I have to deliver this medical equipment. It is an emergency. They need this in 6 hours, and you are already delaying my shipment. It is the matter of 6 people. Here, take my number and meet me tomorrow at this very spot, and we will see this then. I am going now. Don't follow me. And then I left, and hoped they didn't shoot me or follow me, and they didn't. As promised, I delivered the shipment in time, an hour to spare, and decided to do right on my promise and meet them at the same spot the next day. They were not there. That was the ballsiest thing I ever did as a trucker, and I guess it still is. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. On the morning of October 19th, 1971, Cheryl Spiegel woke up a very excited young lady. It was her 10th birthday, and although she was headed to school that morning, her family had promised her cake and presents on her return home. Obviously, she was very excited. It was her day, her special day, so it was only natural that the birthday girl got a few extra minutes in bed, especially when her regular wake-up time was around 5:30 in the morning. If this meant that Cheryl didn't depart for the school bus with her brothers as she normally did. Instead, she left the house at around 6:25 a.m., headed out into the dark, foggy fall morning all alone. It was a walk that should have just taken a few minutes tops, but Cheryl never made it to school that day. In fact, the morning of Cheryl's birthday will be the last time anyone would see her alive in the mysteries surrounding her death, with puzzle professional and amateur detectives alike for years to come. Following her missing persons report being filed, local police officers conducted interviews with classmates, neighbors, and members of the Spiegel family itself, but not a single person could provide any useful information. The streets had been all but deserted when Sherwood appeared, when local newspaper began reporting sightings of Cheryl in the surrounding area. The police focused their investigation around the possibility of her running away from home, a dire mistake at a crucial time in the investigation, as it amounted to little more than wishful thinking. Because around 2 weeks later, a milk delivery driver was out on his usual morning rounds when he found he needed to take a leak. He pulled over to the side of an isolated country road when he noticed an odd grouping of rocks in the creek bed below him. It appeared as though they'd been deliberately stacked, almost like a pyramid shape. The driver's curiosity got the better of him, and he headed down the slope to further investigate the odd formation. But when he did so, he noticed a small child-sized arm visible in one of the small crevices. The flesh was hideously discolored, with its owner obviously deceased, so the horrified delivery driver rushed to call 911. Shortly afterwards, emergency services arrived at the scene, collecting the corpse, which would soon be identified as the missing Cheryl Spiegel. The birthday girl had been stabbed a total of 26 times, with some of the stab wounds so deep that they ran through her completely. However, they didn't appear to have been the result of a knife. Rather, the wounds were small and puncture-like in nature, as if she had been stabbed with a needle-like instrument. She had also been stripped completely nude, but thankfully, there was little evidence of any kind of physical violation having occurred in a horrible twist of fate. It was her older brother's 11th birthday when her father was summoned to identify her body, forcing him to bear witness to the savage, frenzied manner in which she had been killed. Cheryl was buried 2 days after her body was found on November 6, 1971. Her family held a small ceremony for her at Highland Cemetery in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, and the search for her killer continued with the ever-pervading question: did her birthday play any significance in her abduction, or was it simply a horrible coincidence? Homicide detectives surveyed the surrounding area but didn't find much of interest. The only pertinent location was a gas station, an ATM machine at a bank, and a McDonald's had stayed open until 5 a.m. Aside from those late-night businesses, there were no reasons to be in the area at such a time. But canvassing the area came up with 4 major persons of interest, all of which were spoken to by police. The first was a man who lived across the street from the Spiegel house. According to more than one witness statement, this man would sometimes sit on the porch or in his car and watch the children, not in a wholesome way either. People say that there was something to this man's stare, something chilling in the years following Cheryl's murder. His concerning behavior continued to make his neighbors uncomfortable, even if he was eventually cleared of suspicion. Although he refused to take a polygraph test, which was highly suspicious, it turned out that he had an airtight alibi, as he had been working as a day laborer for a company in nearby Cincinnati. The second person of interest was another of Cheryl's neighbors, a drug-addicted member of a local car theft ring. He had served prison time, had a history of violence. Some was known to be extremely volatile. His alibi for the morning of Cheryl's disappearance was flimsy at best, and he openly admitted to having seen her walk to the bus stop, making him the last person to see her alive. However, he was open to taking a polygraph test, and he actually passed it, despite several people in the street saying they were terrified of him. The third person of interest was obviously the person who claimed to have found the body, the milk delivery driver. This man lived several counties away from the milk company, but he would end his route each day on the road where Cheryl's body was discovered. This daily proximity to her and her family would have given him ample opportunity to plan a successful kidnapping. However, there was no other evidence of his guilt. The man passed a polygraph test and was said to be emotionally devastated by the accusation. Not long after, the police ruled him out. The fourth and final person of interest was a small business owner from the same town. This man was not initially on the police radar as being involved in Cheryl's murder, but several years after, he was charged with assaulting young girls, pleading guilty in a court of law. There was local talk about him bragging about having stabbed Cheryl and putting her in the creek, but the man flatly denied those rumors as hearsay. Police did interview him, and he agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed beyond him supposedly bragging about the murder. There was no forensic evidence to ever tie him to the crime. It should be made clear that Cheryl's dad and stepmother were never considered suspects, and her biological mother was nowhere near Kentucky during the early 70s. However, a couple of interesting facts remain. Cheryl's father said he saw his daughter leave for the bus stop at 6:25 a.m., and no one else reported having seen Cheryl out on the street, which surely would have been busy with other kids and parents out and about that morning. What's more, after Cheryl's body was found, no headstone was ever purchased for her by her immediate family. And the speaker was left town entirely just 2 months later. Cheryl's brother later said that their father never talked about Cheryl or her murder ever again. Whether this was down to guilt or simply grief, it's impossible to know. So what really happened to little Cheryl Spiegel? Was it some kind of horrible accident? Or was foul play to blame? And what exactly made all those tiny pinprick wounds that punctured the length of the breadth of her tiny body? At best, some kind of vicious predatory killer with an unusual weapon cost them. But at worst, someone or something is still out there, and it's hunting children.